Everyone, and welcome to our first virtual trade show, Reserve Study Updates and Funding Challenges. I'm Melissa Brown, CAI San Diego 2020 President. I want to thank our program sponsors, Alta Roofing and Waterproofing, our CLAC upgrades, and virtual exhibitors for your support and commitment. This is our very first virtual trade show, so be prepared. It's going to be amazing. Our virtual exhibitors are AD Magellan, Adam Sterling, Alliance Association Bank, Antis Roofing, Bemis Landscape, Benchmark Landscape, Best Pool Services, Black Diamond Paving, Broadband Agreements, Click and Beard Agency, Community Legal Advisors, Dunn Edwards Paints, Empire Works, Fenton Grant, Fiore Racobson Powers, General Contracting, Gothic Landscape, Christine Avram and Farmers Insurance, LeBon's Landscaping, Mackenzie Rohde, Pacific Western Bank, Park West Landscape, Popular Association Banking, Rayco Exteriors, Riley Pasick, Roseman Law, Roy Palacios Insurance, Same Day Restoration, Seacoast Commerce Bank, ServPro of San Diego City, ServPro Sorrento Valley, the Nauman Law Firm, Union Bank HOA Services, Western Towing, and Pacific Premier Bank. Thank you guys all so much for taking part in our first virtual trade show and being in a virtual exhibitor. We couldn't do this without you guys, so thank you all. Now a message from our program sponsor, Alta Roofing and Waterproofing, and our CLAC upgrades. Best Pool Service, Fenton Grant, Fiore Racobson Powers, Gothic Landscape, LeBon's Landscaping, Rayco Exteriors, Riley Pasick, Roseman Law, and Same Day Restoration. They will all be introducing themselves with a short video.
Good morning, everybody. Mike from Alta Roofing. Hoping everybody's finding ways to stay healthy, happy, and sane. And if you need any help from us, whether it be on a large project or just some advice, give us a call. We're under new protocols, I guess you could say, to make sure everything stays safe. And if there's anything at all we can help with, we'd be happy to. Thanks. Have a great day.
Hi, everyone. This is Jonathan Shapiro from Best Pool Service. We love CAI and creating a community of support and knowledge. Best Pool Service is a leading regional commercial pool service contractor with customers all over Southern California, and we are happy to help with any pool-related needs. We are encouraged by this awesome virtual programming by CAI. Thank you.
Don't be mad at me. I got you into a 9 p.m. board meeting tonight on Zoom.
Come on, Mike.
Yeah. All right.
Dude, seriously, we have to figure out a way to have virtual cocktails because this is, I can't take another Zoom meeting.
Yeah. Actually, funny you say that. Sterling in IT is working on it. Watch. Hold up your cup.
I'm not holding up my cup, but there's no.
No, watch, dude. It's crazy. Watch this.
All right.
Hi, I'm Katie Krupp with Fenton Grant. Thank you for attending today's seminar. We are light years ahead. We want to be your go-to expert for all things construction defect. Please check us out at www.fentongrant.com. And remember, be safe, be smart, and be healthy.
Hello, everyone. I'm John McDowell from the law firm of Fiore Racobson Powers, and I'm managing shareholder of our San Diego County office in Vista. We're so happy to sponsor the CAI San Diego chapter virtual trade show, and especially pleased that CAI can provide this opportunity virtually so the chapter can continue to fulfill its dual missions of education and advocacy. I had the privilege to be directly involved in CAI's advocacy as the statewide chair of CLAC, the California's Legislative Action Committee, in 2017 and 2018. Closer to home, Fiore Rake and Powers provides a full range of legal services to community associations, including assessment collections, and of course, assisting associations in reopening from the coronavirus pandemic. We are 14 lawyers in 4 offices across Southern California, and 4 of us, myself included, have been awarded membership in CAI's College of Community Association Lawyers, and that's quite an honor as well. Enjoy the trade show and the program.
I promise. 2 simple words that can change the world. 2 words that cement a sacred agreement. For over 30 years, the people at Gothic Landscape have been delivering on their promises. The promise to be relentless in the pursuit of excellence, to be dedicated to their clients' success, to be tireless problem solvers, to deliver value above and beyond the expected, to make extraordinary service appear ordinary. When Louis and Judy Giorgio founded Gothic, and when their son Mike turned it into the company it is today, they set out to create more than a landscape company. They created a family, proud, fiercely loyal, competitive, honest. When the Gothic family gives our word, there's never a doubt that we will deliver. I promise, just 2 words, but to Gothic Landscape, they're everything. All we stand for and all we have built come from keeping our promises to our clients and our family. Gothic Landscape, the family you trust.
Hey everybody, good afternoon. My name is Nathan Cornett. I am the Director of Business Development at LeBon's Landscaping, as well as President-elect of the CAI San Diego Board of Directors. We are proud to support CAI. We're proud of the work that we are doing in San Diego and in the state on behalf of our HOA communities. There's a lot of work to be done, and you guys are a part of that, and I'm proud to join with you. LeBon's Landscaping has been serving San Diego County for 40 years. It's hard to believe, but it's true. We would love to partner with you to manage your landscaping. We have irrigation and horticulture experts on our team that would love to work with you to make your property shine. So when you think of landscaping, think of LeBon's Landscaping, and when you need a bid, give me a call. My number is 619-823-5974. I look forward to talking to you about your landscaping. Now let's get back to the trade show, everybody. Have a good day.
Hi, my name is Gabe Cooley. I am the president of Rayco Exteriors. We are a full-service general contractor operating all throughout Southern California. And I have our newest team member here with us, Kim.
Hi, everybody. I'm super excited to have joined the Rayco family.
And we wanted to come on today to let you know that we miss you. We know that these are turbulent times, and I'm sure that your email box is filling up and your phone is ringing off the hook, especially as you're opening up your communities. And we wanted to let you know that we're here for you. Use us as an asset if it's possible. If your boards are deciding to delay projects or push jobs off into the future, give us a shout. Let us help you figure out whether it's feasible to get a job done this year or what might need to be delayed into future years.
We just really want to thank you for all that you're doing during these unprecedented times. We'd like to wish your family and you health and happiness. Stay well. We love you, and we're here for you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Webster, and I'm the Director of Strategic Development for the law firm of Riley Passett Canty. We are a construction resolution law firm here in the state of California. The firm was formed several years ago with the philosophy that there has to be a better, more positive way of helping younger community associations that might be experiencing construction-related issues, rather than simply going in and filing a lawsuit against the developer and dragging the association through lengthy, unnecessary, and sometimes extremely expensive construction defect litigation. Since the firm formed, our philosophy has proven to be extremely successful, and it's been very well received, and we would be happy to talk with you about the programs that we offer. So if you manage or are a board member of a younger community association that might be experiencing construction-related issues, or that needs to get into compliance with Senate Bill 326, the new debt bill, please reach out to us. We'd be glad to answer any questions or help you out in any way we can. You can find us at www.rileypasek.com. That's RILEYPASEK.com. And we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for your time and have a great rest of your day.
Good afternoon, CAI San Diego. My name is Teresa Agnew, and I'm the President of Operations for Roseman Law. And I'm here just to give you a little intro about Roseman Law. We are a real estate law firm, and we represent homeowners associations. We have areas in general counsel, we have a delinquent assessment department, and construction defect litigation. But I just wanted to focus in really quickly with the transitioning now back to common areas and opening our common area facilities. We have actually started, well, we have through the entire pandemic, at a weekly Q&A. It's live, it's free, it's called Ask Roseman Law with the partners of Roseman Law to help our clients and our community managers field any questions they have. Please go ahead and you're welcome to join us every week. And also we are doing emergency rules right now. We're drafting emergency rules for a fixed fee. So if you guys have any questions and need any kind of legal guidance, we're definitely here to help through this process. Look forward to the program and look forward to hopefully seeing everybody soon. Take care.
Hi, this is Frank with Same Day Restoration. We're your same-day restoration provider here in San Diego. We provide flood, fire, and mold remediation services. We're also a general contractor that supports our remodel division. If you find yourself in a situation where you're in need of emergency restoration services, you can always reach me on my cell at 858-752-3028.
Those were fantastic videos. I really enjoyed all of those. So thank you all who were our program sponsors and our clack upgrades and your fantastic videos. Much appreciated. So today's presenters are Matthew Swain. Matthew earned the Community Association Institute's Reserve Specialist designation and has the distinction of being RS number 134. Matthew caters to a host of urban, mid, and high rises, as well as beachfront resorts, while also maintaining a strong portfolio of suburban North County PUDs to rural East County HOAs. Matthew is recognized as a leading educator of reserve topics through seminars at local management firms, as well as master's level real estate courses conducted through San Diego State University. Pam Richardson serves as corporate counsel for community associations. Her practice includes interpretation and drafting of governing documents, enforcement of governing documents, drafting and negotiating of contracts and other agreements, helping associations understand and comply with statutory guidelines and requirements, and other related issues in community association governance. Prior to joining Birding Weil, Pam practiced community association law with 2 San Diego-based firms. Before practicing law, Pam worked in the hotel industry in positions such as general manager, regional manager, and VP of operations. Please welcome Matt and Pam.
Melissa, thank you so much for the introduction. And thank you so much for all of our sponsors for their support of CAI, especially in these challenging times we find ourselves in. Before we begin, I'd like to note that due to the number of people attending, everyone has been muted, but you can still ask questions at any time by typing your question into the question box at the bottom of your control panel. We have someone monitoring those throughout the program to help us moderate the Q&A session at the end, so that as questions come up, you can feel free to just type them in right away. And we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the presentation. Unfortunately, all too often, we see boards choosing to keep assessments artificially low by not assessing the right amount for reserves. This move typically ends up with some very serious consequences. Today, we're going to walk you through National Reserve Study standards and best practices.
Matt?
Yeah.
Can you share your PowerPoint, please?
Is it not showing up?
No.
Okay.
There it is.
Yes. Sorry about that. So today we're going to walk you through National Reserve Study standards, best practices, legal requirements, the consequences of different funding decisions, and California Civil Code 5551, commonly referred to as the balcony bill.
So starting with the reserve requirements, Civil Code Section 5550A provides requirements for reserve studies, including a visual inspection at least once every 3 years and an annual review by the board. So this brings up a question, Matthew. Are reserve studies, particularly the site inspection portion, still happening in the midst of everything going on with COVID-19 social distancing?
Absolutely. Association Reserves, and from what I understand, other reserve firms as well, are conducting site inspections on time for clients to make sure they have accurate guidance for these really crucial budget decisions. We're regularly monitoring national, statewide, and local guidance and orders to ensure we stay in compliance with best practices, including carrying and using hand sanitizer while on site inspections, monitoring site inspectors for fever, any other symptoms, wearing masks, social distancing, etc.
Okay, great. So Section B of Civil Code Section 5550 provides the minimum requirements for the studies. As the studies require expertise to complete, associations generally rely on professionals to assist them in evaluating the properties and producing detailed reserve studies to comply with the laws.
Back in the 1990s, a group of industry professionals from across the country defined National Reserve Study standards that were adopted by CAI. This set of standards brought about uniform terms and calculations to the industry. One key term that was defined was the four-part test. It gave standardized tests could be applied to any property to determine what should and should not be in a reserve study. This test asks whether the component is a common area maintenance responsibility, has a limited life, has a predictable remaining useful life, and is above a minimum threshold cost. Another standard that was defined was the levels of service that a reserve specialist offers. A full reserve study should only need to be done once in the life of a completely built-out property. I mention this because all too often I hear from associations that would like to request a proposal for their full 3-year study. Once the initial component list has been defined and quantified, updates can then be conducted to that full study by way of either a with site visit or a no site visit update. This allows associations to save money by not having to recreate the component list every time you switch vendors or have a site visit conducted. Next up from National Reserve Study standards is the 3 key results that are found in any professionally prepared reserve study prepared in accordance with National Reserve Study standards. The component list is shown at the bottom of this pyramid as it truly is the foundation upon which the calculations are made for both the current reserve fund strength, measured in terms of percent funded, and the funding plan. In 2019, so just last year, CAI again gathered a group of industry professionals together to revisit the standards after over 2 decades in use to bring further uniformity and clarity to the industry. 4 main categories were addressed in this explanation of reserve study standards based on the National Reserve Study standards. A copy of this report can be found online at CAI National's website at caionline.org. The first category discussed is a reserve component inventory. 6 topics are discussed in this section, and I encourage you to review the entire document for details on all items. One particular item that really stands out is the capital improvement section. It's generally seemed to be common knowledge in our industry that capital improvements should not be paid out of reserves, but rather added into a reserve study after the improvement project is completed. This is supported by National Reserve Study standards and is quite clear-cut when an association wants to install, say, a new tennis court, a new entry fountain, or a photovoltaic solar energy system where there previously wasn't one. What we've seen over the years, however, is that communities are less sure of their decision when an item is incidental, a natural evolution, or is already a part of an existing asset or system. Take, for instance, the downtown high-rise that built over 25 years ago. It had its original 16-camera analog black and white security camera system. If they upgrade to an 18-camera digital NVR-based color camera system, is this a capital improvement to the original construction assets? Not all the cameras existed, and the NVR color technology certainly wasn't used. CAI's new explanation of National Reserve Study standards supports communities utilizing reserve funds for incidental reserve expenses, such as replacing the 16 lounges with 20, or adding a microwave during a clubhouse remodel, or a natural evolution of projects where a component or system is obsolete in its current form, but a newer technology exists, such as the camera system noted. This form also includes utilizing reserve funds for expenses that were part of an existing asset or system, things such as plywood or fascia repairs during a re-roof project. Another key point of this section is that reserve study component lists should be expected to evolve over time. Boards, managers, and even reserve professionals will have different philosophies, and minor differences in the component list should be considered normal over time.
So to delve into this a little further, there's no definition in Civil Code for capital improvements. Black's Law Dictionary defines capital expenditures or capital improvements as an outlay of funds to acquire or improve a fixed asset. Some governing documents may also provide some guidance with definitions of capital improvements to aid boards in understanding how to categorize certain expenses. Additionally, governing documents may also require a vote of the membership for capital improvements over a certain dollar amount or percentage of the budget. This would be a separate provision from those provisions regarding the necessity of membership votes for increases to assessments or special assessments. But without additional guidance in the governing documents as to exactly what should be classified as a capital improvement, the analysis becomes a little trickier. Classifying new components, such as new fountain, is fairly straightforward. However, a major upgrade in equipment or materials to an existing feature should be evaluated carefully. The association is not changing the function of the component, so arguably this isn't a capital improvement. However, if the cost to upgrade the equipment or materials used is significantly higher than has been budgeted for in the reserve fund, this may also be considered a new capital improvement.
The second section focuses on calculating percent funded. Percent funded, of course, measures how well an association has, or hasn't, saved up reserve funds as compared with the amount of deterioration or aging that has occurred at your association. One of the key explanations clarified by CAI is with regards to the fully funded balance figure. This figure is defined as being an annual figure and doesn't change throughout the year. This definition was necessary to avoid a community missing the intent of a reserve study. The reserve study is an annual budget planning tool, and as such, it shouldn't be concerned with trying to value a component's fully funded balance down to the day or month. Reserve studies give annual budget guidance for how to adequately allocate association funds towards the annual deterioration of components. According to this definition, there is no different fully funded balance for a component, or for that matter, for a community, on May 21st as compared with September 8th for the same fiscal year. The fully funded balance simply is what it is for the whole year.
So there's another issue related to percent funded that may be found in the association's governing documents. This one was highlighted in a recent case, Sands versus Walnut Creek Condominium Association. The case itself had to do with a roof leak and the association's responsibility for maintaining the roof. The homeowner claimed that the association was negligent in performing its duties to maintain the roof. So the court didn't find negligence here, but it did find that the association may have breached its governing documents. And the reason why is the governing documents required that the association maintain its components in first-class condition. So this is definitely a provision to be aware of and to watch out for as the association's determining an asset's lifespan in a reserve study or establishing budgets for maintenance, repair, and replacement.
The third section of this explanation of National Reserve Study standards discusses reserve funding goals. Boards can choose one of 3 goals to pursue. Full funding, where an association strives to reach and maintain 100% funding as their long-term funding goal. Threshold funding, where an association chooses a different percentage, such as 70 or 50%. And baseline funding, where an association simply chooses to fund just enough to avoid running out of reserves in any one year. Of course, that only happens if all projects go according to schedule and are exactly on budget. But one key definition that came out of this document is that of adequate reserves. This term is now defined as a replacement reserve fund and stable and equitable multi-year funding plan that together provide for the timely execution of the association's major repair and replacement expenses as defined by National Reserve Study standards, without reliance on additional supplemental funding. While all 3 goals, full, threshold, and baseline, fit this definition, associations must weigh the risk of special assessment above adequacy.
So, how much funding is needed? As you know, this is an area of a great deal of debate within associations. There's currently no requirement under the law as to how much reserve funding an association must have. The only requirements are found in Civil Code Section 5300, which details disclosures to members regarding the reserve account as part of the annual budget report.
And the fourth and final section goes into the details behind cash flow and component funding methods, which can be explored more deeply in other continuing education courses, as I could easily spend an hour or so going into each of these methods and how they apply to reserve funding plans. Reserve studies are going to be understood differently depending on who you are and how you've interacted with association budgets and associations in general before. It's important to remember that at their very core, reserve studies are a budget tool. They're simply a plan. The studies are used to calculate the annual rate of deterioration each association's reserve components are aging at, so that each association can then realize the bill for this annual deterioration, pay for that annual deterioration by transferring the right amount of money into reserves, and then be prepared for that actual bill that comes due over the years so that they can complete reserve projects on time and on budget.
Many associations, particularly right now, given the unpredictable economic times, will choose to maintain their funding levels as they have over the last several years. Unfortunately, a few may also choose to contribute less money to the reserves and may even have to borrow from them due to the uncertainty of delinquencies in the community and the need to maintain day-to-day operations. Although we don't recommend it, this may be a reality for some. Projects may need to be prioritized based upon whether the expenditures can occur as they were budgeted or if they can be delayed. Directors will need to document their decisions regarding this issue, so there's no question that board decisions were made in good faith after the board did their due diligence. And also, we want to make sure that the board has determined these decisions were in the best interest of the association.
In addition to documenting their decisions, associations should be working hand in hand with their reserve specialists to determine the long-term ramifications of these funding decisions, no matter what they are. The business judgment rule gives boards wide latitude for their decisions made, but one key element to the business judgment rule is to rely on their experts. So if a board does choose to hold funding steady or even reduce it, hopefully as just a temporary measure, they should still see what sort of future increases are going to be necessary to reserves to strive for adequate reserves in the future. Remember, reserve adequacy is a two-part definition. It includes both current funds and the long-term funding plan.
So the good news is there are other associations that may be facing less financial strain and will continue to look forward and evaluate their funding needs as variables such as whether funding levels are still appropriate given the age of the project, new additions that would enhance the value of their project, and expenditures that may be required under the law.
As I mentioned earlier when discussing National Reserve Study Standards and the explanation article published by CAI last year, one evolution that we're seeing in the reserve component lists this year across California is related to SB 326, commonly referred to as the Balcony Bill, now included in California Civil Code 5551.
So several scary incidents in apartments led to the adoption of Civil Code 5551, which we call the Balcony Bill. The next few slides show some examples of balconies that failed, killing and injuring a number of people. These next several slides are of a balcony that collapsed in Berkeley. The first drawing shows a depiction of what happened when the balcony collapsed. It flipped upside down and landed on the balcony below. So here's a picture of that collapse. The other was a drawing. And then we have it this is from another angle. So then that same year, another apartment building balcony collapsed in Folsom. And this is a picture of that one.
Not all communities with balconies do fall under this requirement, and some properties without balconies will fall under this requirement. It's crucial that each community that may fall under this law reach out to legal counsel to determine whether or not they do. Some of the nuance behind what properties are required to have these inspections conducted include that they're organized as a California condominium. If your community is organized as something other than a condominium, such as a PUD, it doesn't fall under this requirement. Also, the association must be responsible for maintaining these elements. Next, we start to get into the construction details of what condominiums fall under this requirement. The property must have some sort of element that is 6 feet or more off the ground, that's designed for human occupancy, such as a deck, balcony, or staircase. Take a quick look at this photo. At a glance, many would see the balcony and assume it needs an inspection under Civil Code 5551. But look closely. Notice there are only windows overlooking the balcony. A close inspection of this property makes it appear that at least this component may not actually fall under 5551, as the balcony doesn't appear to be designed for human occupancy. It appears to be more of a decorative accent. Next up is a taller building design that has similar elements, but notice that this building has sliding glass doors that lead out to the balcony. This element would fall under Civil Code 5551, as these balconies are designed for human occupancy. Another key construction detail specified in 5551 is that the elements must be supported by beams, joists, columns, or posts. But we can't always see these elements. This balcony clearly shows some of these obvious structural elements that are included in 5551. One interesting nuance to the code is that the elements must extend beyond the exterior walls of the building. Take a look at this balcony. Notice how the balcony itself is completely contained within the footprint of the building. It's more than 6 feet above grade. It's supported by beams, joists, columns, or posts, but it doesn't extend beyond the walls of the actual building itself. So this balcony type likely wouldn't fall under 5551. This next set of balconies look like they fit the criteria designed so far, but there's one more key element to determining what is included in 5551 and what isn't. The elements must be constructed of wood or wood-based products. As this building's made of steel and concrete, this building and these elements would not be subject to the requirements in 5551. As you can tell, there are some very specific details that will dictate whether or not a property falls under this law. So it's absolutely good practice to discuss with legal counsel and qualified architects and engineers now to see whether your association fits the criteria, and if so, what elements are required to be inspected.
So Matthew mentioned, this is not just about balconies. Balconies and other exterior components are defined as load-bearing components that extend beyond the exterior walls of the building, are over 6 feet above ground level, and are designed for human occupancy and use. These components include decks, balconies, stairways, walkways, and railings. So here are some good examples of other exterior components that show extreme deterioration and will be part of the required inspections. To comply with the requirements of this law, a visual inspection must be performed by a licensed structural engineer or architect. This inspection requires much more than just having a professional walk around the building and look to see if the balconies or other exterior components appear to be structurally unsound. Under this law, a visual inspection means that the load-bearing component itself needs to be inspected. Often a load-bearing component may be covered by a soffit, stucco, or other building materials, and inspection of these components may require techniques or equipment that allow for visual inspection underneath the covering. This inspection may be accomplished through the use of moisture meters, borescopes, or infrared technology. And depending on the outcome of these inspections, even more intrusive inspections, including destructive testing, may be necessary to determine the safety of the component. The visual inspection in this new law is nothing like the visual inspection performed by a reserve specialist. The report that is produced must list and identify the conditions of load-bearing components, including those that are immediate safety threats. These will be reported to the association right away and to local code enforcement within 15 days of completion of the report. These safety threats must be repaired right away. You don't want to take any chances on these. For other components, the report will estimate their remaining life and repair recommendations. So these pictures show how many different types of areas may need to be inspected. The number of exterior load-bearing elements that must be inspected will be up to the licensed structural engineer or architect who's doing the inspection. The law requires that a statistically significant number is inspected. Technically, a statistically significant number is a sufficient number of units inspected to provide 95% confidence that the results from the sample are reflective of the whole, with a margin of error no greater than plus or minus 5%. Got that? Unfortunately, this isn't an objective standard, and it leaves the determination of the number of components that need to be inspected up to the person performing the inspections. And that person's professional reputation and license may be affected if they inspect too few. The inspection includes not only this quantitative analysis, but also a qualitative analysis. The professional performing the inspection must exercise their professional judgment in determining the necessity, scope, and breadth of any further inspection.
To summarize, the report that is prepared will document unintrusion and other potential defects and/or damage. The engineer or architect will then report on what is necessary to make the elements generally safe. We'll notice the city or other governing entity, such as the county, and will provide the community with a report on useful life and repair recommendations. The report fee itself will not include an actual repair scope and of costs, as those are unknown until after the inspection and report are completed and a scope of work is defined for prospective bidders.
So as I previously mentioned, there are an immediate, as I previously mentioned, if the report notes that there are immediate threats to the safety of residents, the association should take care of these issues right away, as they have to be reported by the inspector or inspecting professional to local code enforcement within 15 days of completion of the report. Local code enforcement will be able to recover costs of enforcement from the association too. The first official inspection reports must be completed by January 1st, 2025. The frequency of how often these reports must be done vary depending on when the association was built.
The report is recommended to be coordinated with your next site visit reserve study, as these are conducted, if done in accordance with California Civil Code, every 3 years. As we're currently in 2020, this gives the association 2021, 22, and 23 as viable options to conduct their next site visit for the reserve study, as well as elevated structure inspection to comply with these new requirements. Ideally, the community should have the elevated structure elements inspected before the reserve study, so that your reserve specialist can then review the findings of the structural element report before they conduct their site visit and subsequent financial analysis that would include potential repair costs. This isn't always going to work this way, unfortunately, though. Just this past month, while I was on a site visit, I noticed structural deficiencies in an elevated wood deck where beams were exposed, so visual inspection required no removal of other materials. While the RS credential doesn't qualify reserve specialists to conduct the elevated structure inspection in compliance with 5551, when we do see obvious concerns, we of course report them to management and/or the board so they can bring an expert out to more thoroughly investigate. This particular concern was reported to management, and they will now need to have that structural analysis completed in 2020 after their reserve study site visit, as it's not prudent to wait 3 more years. This should be an outlier case, however, with most communities able to coordinate the elevated structure inspection ahead of their next reserve study. Once completed, the elevated structure inspection is required to be conducted every 6 or 9 years. Of course, I'll go back to my example noted a moment ago. If in the future your community is not yet due for that 6 or 9 year cycle, but a concern is observed, you should of course get those concerns evaluated by a qualified professional.
Inspections for balconies and other exterior elevated components are an expense that can and should be included in future reserve studies, as they do pass the 4-part test to qualify for a reserve expense that Matthew discussed in the beginning of our presentation. To recap these, they most likely fall within the association's common area maintenance responsibility. They have both a limited life and a predictable useful life, as they're done every 6 or 9 years. And the cost will likely be above the minimum threshold cost. So costs for these inspections will vary based upon the association due to accessibility issues and building design. But to give you an example, 2 to 3 story buildings with no scaffolding, on those we found that costs are averaging $700 to $900 per deck for non-destructive testing, but $3,000 to $3,500 for destructive testing. So while they're looking at this, associations might also want to consider adding soffit vent or access panels to reduce future inspection costs. And these could cost maybe $1,800 per deck. So once the association receives their report, you definitely want to share it with your reserve study provider, as there will likely be new and significant line items to be incorporated into the association's reserve study. This will change the percent that the reserves are funded and will lead to updated recommendations for funding plans to avoid possible special assessments in the future due to insufficient funds.
Associations should make sure they provide a copy of their report to your reserve specialist so that findings can be incorporated into the reserve study. At this time, we're adding funding for the inspection only, with the expectation that repairs will vary greatly from property to property and should be incorporated on an individual basis based on actual concerns identified by the inspector. You should already have some funds in reserves for elevated structures, but it won't necessarily be enough to cover major repairs to hidden issues discovered during this inspection.
So for immediate safety threats that need to be taken care of right away, the association may need to borrow from the reserves. And of course, funds that are borrowed from reserves need to be paid back within 12 months. The association may need to levy a special assessment and/or obtain a loan to pay back the reserves. 2025 really isn't very far away, and given the amount of money that may be required to pay for inspections and take care of immediate issues, it really is smart to start building reserve funds now to pay for necessary repairs. Additionally, in some situations, it may make sense to do some initial inspections and repairs now before elements are officially inspected to determine any areas that may require work to be taken care of now so that you can avoid safety issues and also the reporting by the inspectors to local code enforcement.
And at this time, we'd like to open it up to questions, and maybe have our moderator come on.
Well, I don't see any questions actually. So if anybody has questions, you can either put them in the chat box or in the Q&A box. I'm keeping an eye on that, but we didn't have any questions that came in.
Thank you very much.
Oh, here's a question. How could vendors help boards prepare their budget for 2020? Or 2025 maybe? 2021.
Well, a good starting point would be to get some bids on your balcony inspections, those elevated structure inspections. Get 3 competitive bids and forward those to your reserve specialist. Make sure that you have accurate numbers, not just the general ones that we talked about, but of course, there are so many different factors from stairs to railings, balconies, things like that, that we need to make sure that we're factoring in actual costs. So the sooner managers and boards can get those estimates, the sooner we can factor in more precise numbers rather than more generic estimates.
Does anybody else have any questions for our panelists here? No? Okay, I don't see any other questions coming in. So
I can open up the floor if you'd like and allow all attendees to chat or to talk, sorry, so that we can hear them.
Here's another question. Should we be reserving for balcony inspections?
Absolutely. The inspections fit the 4-part test. They're common area maintenance. They have a limited life. We know when they need to be done by January 1st, 2025. They're either on a 6 or 9 year cycle, and they're definitely going to be above that minimum threshold that makes it something that's going to be really hard to absorb into at least most communities' operating budget. So fits a 4-part test, should absolutely be including it in your reserve study.
And another question is, how do you calculate the funding percent of a reserve? And I assume maybe it's a reserve element, maybe?
So percent funding of a reserve, you take the amount of life that's used up, and that's a percentage. So if you have, simplest example I like to go through is a $10,000 component, last 10 years, 5 years through the life, you've used up half of it. So you should have half of that total cost to replace. So 100% funded for halfway through the life would be $5,000. So if you have $2,500 at that point in time, you're 50% funded. If you have $5,000 halfway through the life, you're 100% funded. Doesn't mean you can replace it at that time. It just means that you're on track. So you've kept pace with the deterioration.
Okay, let's see. Like there might have been another question that came in. Nope, actually I think we got the questions. Again, anybody have any other questions they want for our panelists? I know the SB 326 is, new law this year. It's got to be implemented by 2025. You guys must have just covered it so well.
Well, I will just reiterate that 2025 is right around the corner. So it's really important that you start getting those bids now. Start planning for those inspections, because as you saw, the costs are going to be pretty steep. And the sooner you get those done, you're not going to be at the end of kind of the crunch when everybody else is trying to do it in 2024 to get in just before that deadline. So try not to do it last minute. You'll save a lot of money, because it'll probably costs will go up a lot by the time we get to 2024, since so many people are going to be needing to do it then.
Okay, here's another question. Is it the attorney or engineer architect who should let association know if their decks need to be inspected?
It's going to be a team, I would say. You want to start with your attorney because the architect engineer isn't going to know how those governing documents are organized, whether it's California condominium, things like that. But then once the attorney's gone through the requirements, you may also need some more clarification from an engineer or architect. So definitely want to start with the attorney though.
Hey Matthew, is the contractor community up to speed on the law? Will I have to train them?
There definitely are architects and engineers that are up to speed, especially those that participate in CAI, that show up to events, that that get involved with CLAC, that know all about legislation because they signed up for the CLAC newsletter. You're going to find a lot that aren't though too. So that's one of the great things about CAI. Working with vendors who participate and who advertise and who know about CAI are much more likely to be well versed in the law than just going through your local yellow pages.
The good GCs, general contractors, should be following these new mandated laws. More of a statement than a question, but agree.
Agreed. Wholeheartedly.
Let's see. The information in my reserve study hasn't changed for 20 years. How do I know the appropriate areas have been covered with reserves?
Well, through the diligent visual inspection that's done every 3 years, that's one key piece. When you look at going through your component list versus your actual expenses, are they matching up? Do you have funds for those projects where the bills are actually coming due? If you don't, if you're seeing expenses come through that you're having to pay for, and you're continuing to have to tell your reserve specialist to add line after line after line for components that aren't there at all, then maybe they haven't adequately been covered. If, on the other hand, you're keeping pace with those expenses, and when you look at your reserve study, you see the actual components for the bills that you're writing checks for, that's a good indication that the appropriate areas have been covered with reserves.
I don't see any other questions coming in. Those are some good ones. Oh, wait, just when I say that, another one comes in. Will the attendees be receiving a copy of the PowerPoint? Karen?
Sorry, what was that?
The question is, will the attendees be receiving a copy of the PowerPoint?
Yes, I can send them one.
Okay, great. Okay, here's another question. The percentage funding of our HOA is 0.69%. Please comment.
Well, if it truly is 0.69%, less than 1%, that's a pretty dire situation. Our company did a statistical analysis of over 25,000 reserve studies that we conducted over 25 years. And we found that the risk of special assessment for clients that are below 30% funded is 1 in 3. And those special assessments are for reserve expenses. So when the roof fails early or is bigger than maybe it was anticipated, you have more repairs, things like that. That risk drops to 1 in 10 when they're above 30% funded, drops to 1 in 100 when they're over 70% funded. So if that really is less than 1%, that's a pretty scary place to be. But of course, depending on whether it's a new association that doesn't have any expenses coming up over the next 5 years, or if it's a 50-year-old community that maybe has a lot of expenses coming up, that's really going to vary as far as their risk of special assessment, depending on more than just percent funded. So that's a key metric, but it's not the only metric that you need to focus on.
Yeah, but I would say it's time to look really hard at your budget as you're writing it this fall or whatever your cycle is, just to really consider how you are going to possibly increase assessments so that you are starting to put some money into that reserve account. You're going to need it sooner rather than later.
Yeah,
So-
one reminder that I like to put out there is reserve expenses don't go away just because you ignore them. They tend to just get more expensive the longer you put them off. So if you're not putting those funds aside, that $100,000 roof project may be 120 or 150 by the time you get around to it. So it is important to get that budget bulked up.
So another question is, well, and actually comment, it is truly 0.69%. The HOA is 45 years old. So here's another question. If one of our balconies fails tomorrow, will our community be held to the new law requirements? Can we be sued?
Well, you won't the requirements of the new law as far as the inspections, but certainly if there is an element of the common area that fails, the association could be held accountable for that.
Yeah, this new requirement is not. This new requirement doesn't say that associations have never had to take care of these elements before. Associations have still had to maintain the common area. They still are responsible for taking care of them. But because property owners, specifically the apartment in Berkeley that Pam referenced, weren't taking care of them, that's what's added to this requirement. So just because they haven't had to have this specific inspection wouldn't mean that they're not liable necessarily.
Who is policing this? Question mark. That's a good question. I'm assuming the inspections to make sure they're done.
Yeah, that is a good question. I mean, when there are situations where there are imminent safety threats, of course, they're going to be reported to the local code enforcement. So there's some enforcement there. As far as policing the other, just making sure you're getting your inspections done, I am not specifically aware of an authority that has been assigned to police that. However, you know, as you're doing your reserve studies and budgets, et cetera, this is something that needs to come up so that you can be taking care of it. Certainly, if you're not doing this and you have an injury or a death, you are going to be in a lot of trouble with that.
The question is, are there deck police?
Deck?
Depends on who's in your community.
Deck. Balcony police, deck police.
Like most of civil code, it takes a lawsuit usually to enforce that. But of course, it is an additional requirement. So if something happened, like Pam said, this probably would increase the responsible party if they didn't follow the law on something that they're supposed to do.
Okay, any last few questions? Any other questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions coming in. Melissa, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Matt and Pam. That was a great presentation, very informative. I'll wrap up with a thanks again to all of our sponsors and for hanging in there with us as we try to come up with creative ways and getting your videos and all of that stuff. So that's been fantastic. Keep an eye out in your emails. We did just send out an e-blast. In that e-blast was a poll about upcoming events. So we're really trying to get some membership feedback on how you feel in doing in-person events so that we can gauge and plan for our remainder of our calendar year. So appreciate everybody taking the time to respond to that and attending today. And with that, enjoy the rest of the afternoon and the weekend.